Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhood podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. It is Sunday, June 12th, 8:44 p.m. Precisely Pacific Standard Time.
Jeez.
I've run out. Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Hey Dan, how's it going?
Sorry, that was the best I had right now in this moment.
Hey, it's all good. This is Ruined Childhoods. That
Yes.
was Dan bringing in the intro, and I'm John. And this podcast is where we talk about cult and classic movies, and also just movies that we generally enjoy, and how we could bring them back as a remake, reboot, prequel, sequel, board game, dog toy, whatever.
Dog toy.
I don't know.
Okay.
I went shopping for some dog toys today, so I guess dog toys are fresh on the brain.
Were there any movie tie-in dog toys?
Oh, certainly there's a DeLorean dog toy.
You know what I'm picturing
like
when I picture movie-related dog toy. Honestly, I'm picturing a Starship Enterprise that you could play a little tug of war with.
1,000%. Those definitely exist. But before we get into talking about Back to the Future, which is the subject of this episode, I first wanted to give a shout out to Jennifer Hudson, who at the time of this recording had just gotten her EGOT. She got the Tony, so she just EGOTted.
Oh,
how
wow.
cool is that?
Wow, congratulations, J HUD.
Yeah, very exciting. I mean, from Sex and the City movie to here, I think that isn't she in the Sex and the City movie?
Is she Jennifer? I mean, Jennifer Hudson. I think Dreamgirls.
I was making a joke.
Respect. Oh, the Sex and the City movie.
No, I was making a joke that she was in such a terrible movie for.
Oh, was she in that?
I think so.
I have never seen a Sex and the City movie or episode. I have not seen it.
So
ever.
I tried to get through the original series, and it is tough. I mean, especially lately, now that we know better about so many things. It's tough. Yes, she was in both Sex and the City movies. So anyway,
neither of her Oscars came from those, though.
No. So yeah. Anyway, that just came across my newsfeed, and I was like, oh damn, that's awesome. EGOTten. That's no easy feat.
No, I mean,
I've been working on it for my whole life, and I don't have any of those.
I am 0/4 on the way. I feel like the Grammy would probably be the kind of the easy one,
unless you're
first.
A producer. Like, if you are on the producing team for a movie, maybe that's how you get an Oscar.
An Oscar, just you put in enough money, so
or an Emmy. You're part of a team, or an Emmy. Maybe you're in a writer's room and it gets an Emmy. It's there's things like that where it's just oh, hey, I've got an Emmy. Or you could get a regional Emmy if you are there's definitely a lot of people who get those regional Emmys. Not to say that they don't deserve the praise. But
I have friends who have been nominated for regional Emmys, and I'm incredibly proud of them. And they've got those nominations for great work. So yeah, I would count that towards the EGOT.
Sure.
But I generally speaking, though, the Grammy, I feel like there are so many Grammy categories that you could potentially if I decide I'm gonna crack open Audacity and record an audiobook and self-publish. There's probably a Grammy category for that. It might not be televised, but
yeah,
I don't know. But for best self-recorded, self-published audiobook
by a guy in a basement in Seattle.
Oh, well, I bet I better win that one. Jeez. No, I'm thinking like national. I'm not thinking the regional Grammys.
Oh, no. That's just one category in the national Grammys. Dan, I've got a really fascinating one more thing.
Fabulous.
So this is in regards to our Aerosmith music video episode. And Dan, there's a person who was featured in one of the music videos that I believe we were even just like, wonder what the deal is with that guy. Anyway, who knows? And there's an article in Daily Mail regarding the, as they say, shirtless hunk in the Crazy music video. You know, the guy who is on the tractor that they go skinny dipping with.
Oh, yeah.
So I am just going to go ahead and read kind of their bullet points for this situation. Not to make light of some really bad things that happen, but model who skinny dipped with Alicia Silverstone in Aerosmith's Crazy music video is unrecognizable as he's seen enjoying life as a free man after serving 10-year sentence for murder for hire plot and sexual battery. So his name is Dean Kelly, and his claim to fame is a shirtless cameo in Aerosmith's 1994 Crazy music video. Enjoying life as a free man after a 10-year prison sentence. Former model was released on June 4th after serving time in Washington Parish, Louisiana, for a murder for hire plot as well as sexual battery charges. Kelly, now 51, was snapped in exclusive DailyMail.com photos having breakfast with his mother and a friend at a local restaurant in New Orleans. The once clean-cut model sported long salt and pepper hair, as well as a bushy beard and mustache. He was seen wearing a light blue short-sleeve Magellan shirt, gray cargo pants, sunglasses, and a black newsboy cap. Wow, they are really, keeping their eye on this dude, Dean Kelly.
Wow, okay.
So worry about him no longer, wonder about him no longer. Now we know.
Maybe worry about him if you live in the, Washington Parish area.
Perhaps, yeah.
Louisiana,
we can only hope that he has been reformed. He has spent some time to reflect about the wrongdoings and hopefully thinks about the good times, such as when Alicia Silverstone and Liv Tyler plucked him out of obscurity off of that tractor to go for a dip in the lake.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I hate to say it, but it just seems like that was the path he was heading on. That skinny dip was a detour, and yeah. I mean, I hope he doesn't think about that, because then he's just gonna that would be depressing, and he'll look in the mirror at his salt and pepper hair and beard and the cap that I don't remember the details from the day.
Oh, it's a black newsboy cap, Dan.
Black newsboy cap.
Yeah.
He turned into George R.R. Martin, it sounds.
Sure. Let's go
or
with
Alan
that.
Moore. I don't know. I'm like,
well, you're talking about fantasy and science fiction, and that's a perfect way to get into talking about Back to the Future, Dan.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Why else would I have said that?
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of Back to the Future, I've got to know, do you remember your first time seeing it?
I don't. It was VHS, probably VHS, if not HBO. Did not see it in theater. I saw I saw part 2 in the theater. I saw it twice opening weekend.
Really?
And one of those I think was a family trip, so I think we were along on that. And I believe there was a trip.
I would have been 2.
What's that?
I would have been 2.
No, not the first Back to the Future.
The
Back
second
to the Future
one, right?
2.
Yeah.
In 1989, and
gotcha. Yeah,
in fact, that I remember so well that I'm almost confident that there was either before the movie or after the movie a visit to Pizza Hut to redeem some Book It and get some personal pan pizzas. Yeah. So I remember pretty clearly, and then Back to the Future Part 3. I know I saw it. I saw them 2 and 3 at the Cranford Theater. 3 I still have the ticket stub for.
Do now.
Yeah, well, that was when I started collecting ticket stubs. Was like right.
Yeah, that was 1990.
Yeah, because my first ticket stub that I held on to for absolutely no reason other than that was the day I decided to start keeping them was Bird on a Wire with Goldie Hawn and he
Mel
who
Gibson.
shall not be named.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Gel Mibson.
Gel Mibson.
Gil Mebson.
Yeah. But then Back to the Future 3 came out not long after that, and yeah, I mean, of course, went to go see that. But yeah. I don't remember the first time I saw the original.
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
No, but I'm sure that I did see the second one in the theater during one of those times that you mentioned. My most clear memory about part 2 would have been, I guess, not too long after it probably was out on video, because I remember going to a family friend's house who I went to preschool with. And I was like, you know, our Dan and I are brothers, for anybody who doesn't know. And I was kind of dropped off there. I believe our brother Scott was also there. It was at not that anybody would know, but a family friend, Barbara and Sarah Glassman were the people who we were spending the afternoon with. And I remember they had, I don't know if they had rented it, but the VHS tape of Back to the Future Part 2, and we watched that. And it's just one of those like vivid memories that's just inexplicably in there and taking up space. But I think that part 2 is one that I definitely remember a lot more. I think that a lot of people who grew up in that time probably remember a lot more aspects of the second one. I think that there's a lot of things that came up in the second one that weren't in the first, that kind of became synonymous with, Back to the Future, the nobody calls me chicken stuff and hoverboards and yeah.
Well, hoverboards, I mean, definitely, because now those are like kind of a thing, not exactly in the same way.
Yeah, the self-lacing sneakers and, like all that kind of stuff.
Well, and there's a couple of those things, like you brought up the chicken, the whole chicken thing. There's the character Needles. I was going to wait until after you synopsized. Yeah. But yeah, definitely wanted to bring those up because I've always like, do I miss that in the original every time?
Yeah, no, it's true. So I'm going to go ahead and do a synopsis, and this synopsis is going to cover all 3 movies. And don't worry, I'll inject that in after.
Nice.
In an effort to escape from Libyan terrorists, a teenager named Marty travels back in time 30 years by accident in his older scientist friend's actual time machine. But once he derails the chance meeting between his parents that sparks their relationship, he has to find a way to course-correct history in order to save his own existence. After Marty successfully returns to present day, thanks to the past version of his scientist friend, Doc Brown, visits Marty from the future to enlist his help to save his own son from making a mistake that lands the boy in prison. But when Marty gets the idea to buy a sports almanac that will ensure his personal wealth into the future once he goes back to his present day, Doc explains how it will create a ripple in time-space. Unbeknownst to them both, the conversation is overheard by the elderly version of Marty's dad's bully, Biff, who steals the almanac and the time machine to go back to 1955 to deliver it to his teenage self. Marty discovers this after returning to his present day, which is very much changed due to Biff becoming a wealthy casino owner thanks to his lucky sports almanac. So now, Marty needs to go back to 1955 again to get the almanac back from Biff, which proves to be quite difficult, but Marty manages to get the job done. But by the time he gets back to Doc in the time machine, a lightning bolt hits the machine, leaving Marty stranded in 1955. But moments later, a Western Union man shows up with a note for Marty that was given to them in 1885 with the instruction to deliver it to a specific location in 1955, where Marty currently stands. It's a note from Doc in the past indicating the exact information that Marty would need to get a hidden time machine back in working order so he could take it to 1985. But what Marty and Doc discover is that a week after 1885, when Doc wrote that letter, he was to be killed by Buford Tannen, an ancestor of Biff's. So Marty goes back in time to the Old West against 1885 Doc's wishes to save his life. But after a fuel line is pierced by an arrow, Doc and Marty need to figure out a way to get the time machine up to the right speed in order to trigger the time mechanism. When they come up with their plan, Marty finds himself again in the crosshairs of the Tannen family. Additionally, Doc meets the woman with whom he is said to have fallen in love with according to his future tombstone. Fate joins them together and the plans all change, but not before Marty humiliates Buford Tannen and gets him sent to prison. The plan works and Marty makes it back to the best 1985 possible. He even has grown as a result of his journey and is able to put his ego aside when faced with a challenge. So.
Wow. When you hear it all summed up that way, like just as
we
one
know it's
story.
confusing, but we also know that you've probably seen at least 1 and 2 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So Michael J. Fox plays Marty McFly. Christopher Lloyd is Doc Brown. Leah Thompson plays Marty's mom. In the first film, Crispin Glover plays Marty's dad. In the subsequent films, he is played by Jeffrey Weissman. And in all of them, the Tannen family is all played by Thomas Wilson, who is amazing.
The MVP, all due respect to the rest of the cast, Thomas F. Wilson is the MVP of this trilogy.
Absolutely.
And one of the greatest, at least like just Biff in the original Back to the Future, one of the best villains. One of the most overlooked villains, I would say.
He's fantastic. So in the first film, Marty's girlfriend, Jennifer, is played by Claudia Wells, but is then played by Elizabeth Shue in the subsequent films, but is not in the film for very much time at all. She's usually passed out.
Yeah, well, and then in the second one, she gets to play like her older self too, briefly.
That's true. Yeah. Briefly, that's true.
As Michael J. Fox plays everybody else in the film.
I know. And some other notable actors that are in these, I feel like James Tolkien plays Strickland, the high school principal, and also sheriff in the Old West. He's the sheriff.
He's
some sort of law enforcement, but he hates slackers.
because there's the other, I don't know if it's, maybe it's the deputy who's played by Donovan Scott, aka Leslie Barbara from Police Academy.
Right. Yeah.
I did a triple take.
Yeah. So also I want to note that, you mentioned the character of Needles before, who makes an appearance in the second one and the third one, and that's played by musician Flea, who I don't feel like it's talked enough about how he's just in so many movies, and he has been for such a long time, and it's always great to see him. It's always a nice surprise, and this is, he's kind of perfect in this. And also Billy Zane is in these as is it Biff or Griff's?
Well, both. He's in. Well, actually, no. He's in Biff's gang. I don't think he's in Griff's gang.
No.
Also, Casey Siemaszko.
Casey Siemaszko. That's right. Yeah.
Yes. You might know from 3 O'Clock High, or like I think of him from the film adaptation of Mice and Men. But yeah, Casey Siemaszko, who's also in Biff's gang. Oh, you know what it is? They're also in his gang in the like in alternate 1985.
Mm-hmm.
They're still part of his gang.
Right.
Do this the hard way or the easy way? The easy way.
Yeah, Casey Siemaszko, has been in certainly plenty of things. I feel like he's come up on... Oh, that's right, because he was in Young Guns.
Right, yes, Young Guns.
Yeah. So... Welcome back to the podcast, Casey Siemaszko. Your last name is hard for me to remember how to spell.
And one of these days, we'll talk about 3 O'Clock High.
I'd love to, which I feel, ties in so well with the discussion of Back to the Future Part 3, which takes place in the Old West, and 3 O'Clock High is a nod, an 80s high school nod to the old Westerns. And so, there are certain things that if you want to hear people talk about, I'm just going to run down the list of things that people will talk about on other podcasts that we don't need to go into here. One of them being the whole controversy behind Crispin Glover not being in the second or third movies, and the lawsuits that came up as a result of that. And I will also add that I saw that that Jeffrey Weissman, who plays George McFly in the subsequent films, very much is trying to capitalize upon that on Cameo, the service where you can purchase personalized messages from celebrities of all kinds. And yeah, he's there. And I also know that Claudia Wells, the original Jennifer, I've seen her on TikTok a little bit. She does a lot of the conventions and really, milks being in that first Back to the Future movie and signs autographs and stuff like that. So, hope she's doing well. That's, a bit of a drudge going to all those conventions, and it must have sucked being replaced.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess what did she do? Like, what else did she do around that time? Because, you don't just pop up in Back to the Future as Michael J. Fox's love interest without having some type of resume.
Yeah, well, Claudia Wells, let's see. This was actually her first movie, and then didn't do any films until 2008. She had done a little bit of television, the show Family, Strike Force, Herbie, Love Bug, Fame. Did an episode of Fame. Just a bunch of...
Sounds about right.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Maybe a little like Simon and Simon.
Yeah. So,
throwing out Trapper John. Oh no, sorry.
Simon and Simon.
She was definitely in an episode of Simon and Simon.
Yeah.
I was just pulling a name out of
Oh, really?
Yeah. No. Yeah, I wasn't actually. It wasn't until I started.
I've never seen Simon and Simon. I want to watch Simon and Simon.
I have never seen Simon and Simon either. And
yes. Something else that we aren't really going to talk about on this episode is Eric Stoltz, the original Marty McFly. For that, you can listen to almost any other podcast that's going to talk about Back to the Future.
Or any documentary, any extra on the DVDs.
But
or Blu-rays.
all I'll say, it's undeniable that Michael J. Fox was the right person for the role of Marty McFly / Calvin Klein / Clint Eastwood. And yeah, these movies, they really just kind of like, it's so complicated to think about how they must have mapped this all out during a time when Back to the Future didn't exist as a template for how time travel and like the butterfly effect can, impact the time-space continuum.
Well, the Ray Bradbury story, A Sound of Thunder, would have been.
There were time travel movies and TV shows and books, but Back to the Future definitely became like Back to the Future and the DeLorean became like iconic time travel indicators, and later on the phone booth from Bill and Ted.
Have you ever ridden in a DeLorean?
I have never ridden in a DeLorean, no.
I have.
Okay. Did we not have a neighbor who had a DeLorean?
No, we didn't have a neighbor, but you're probably remembering a DeLorean parked in our driveway at some point. And it had nothing to do with me going into the future because of my kids. Okay. So a friend of mine in high school, Bob Salguero, hello, Bob, if you're listening. So Bob Salguero I think he was really into the Back to the Future, but he really was into like DeLorean. He had been saving up like long before he got his license to buy a DeLorean.
Did he have like red hair?
No, he had dark hair. He had
I feel like I remember somebody with red hair having a DeLorean and living not too far from us.
That's Eric Stoltz. No, we're not talking about. We don't talk about. Eric.
That was at his consolation prize. Gets to take home a DeLorean.
Yeah, that basically. Yeah, he got to take home the remote control car. So anyway, yeah, so Bob had bought a DeLorean and stopped by one day. I got a ride in the DeLorean, do the doors and everything. Yeah.
And great. These could all be rumors, but I hear that DeLorean may be coming back with an electric model. It's so hard to know what's actually going to happen in real life, but I know that would be really popular. I will say, I guess it must have been probably 1990, maybe 91 or 92, but our brother Scott and I took a trip with our mother to California, just the three of us, and we went to Universal Studios, and they had one of the DeLoreans like on display, behind ropes or whatever, and I definitely have a photo of Scott and myself standing in front of that DeLorean. But I might actually have it nearby. But anyway, I remember going back to school, and whether that was like spring break or summer, I think it was like spring break. And I remember like writing an essay, and I think it was kind of just like what you did on spring break kind of a thing. And I wrote about going out to California and seeing the DeLorean. And I specifically talked about like the DeLorean for a big chunk of this essay. In case you're wondering if I've always been this way.
Focused on which the DeLorean of course chosen because of its stainless steel body.
Right.
Something that very few cars in history have offered, and
it's too heavy.
We're going to circle back around to that a little bit later.
Yeah. So, let's just talk about Back to the Future 1 for a second. So that's the one where he goes back in time and is seduced by, his mother attempts to seduce him, not knowing that it was going to be her future son. And he has to find a way for his father in the past who's a total nerd, to get together with his mom. And the scenes between Michael J. Fox and Crispin Glover in the past are like really fun. They had such great chemistry together.
The whole movie is so much. I look at the Back to the Future trilogy, especially after rewatching it recently. I look at it the way I look at the Rocky series, where it's like, or Jaws, where it's like you've got that first one that really kind of stands on its own as a classic, and then the other ones where you're like, that's interesting. And, I would say mostly with Back to the Future 2, which we'll come back to that as well.
Yeah.
But the first Back to the Future, notable for how it's a masterclass in foreshadowing and in setups, everything. And the attention to detail is so fantastic, right down to Goodyear tires. And I know it's like you've got like basically Goodyear, Firestone, no offense to other tire manufacturers, but like just the like Goodyear. Okay, great. The aging makeup.
Well, it's funny because I feel like only recently Christopher Lloyd has become the age that I think I thought he was in 1985.
I know. Well, that's one of the jokes when he sees he's like, "Look at me, I'm an old man," and he looks the same in the 50s. And
also he in part 2 he takes this face peel off because he wanted to make sure that he went back in time he would look older. It was this whole thing, and then he had the surgery done to de-age him. So funny. There's certainly a lot of things about the first one where it's just like, it's no surprise that it was as well received as it was. It was certainly something completely different and something very much of its time, with the music of Huey Lewis and the News, and the story of a a kid who we all just accepted the fact was friends with a weird scientist. And it's, you know, it's this kid who just kind of got away with things because he was wily and charming and, I don't know, charismatic. And the adults, with the exception of Doc Brown, just always trying to, like, you know, tamp him down and keep him grounded. But he certainly had bigger aspirations for himself, probably more musically than anything else. And I think that what's also really special about Back to the Future is that somehow they made a movie about a kid whose mom falls in love with him in the past, and it became a cultural phenomenon. I love it.
Well, first of all, it's funny. And then secondly, as soon as, like, once there is any physicality between them, it's...
Yeah, she's like, ugh.
She puts on the brakes, but all the setup and God, Leah Thompson is so good. And I'm talking not just about the young Lorraine, but as the older Lorraine. And all, I mean, that's where, like, that aging makeup, like, man, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, and Thomas F. Wilson at the beginning of Back to the Future. I mean, especially when you're a kid, like, when you're a kid, you don't really notice it, but I'm watching it now and I'm like, I totally buy these people as, like, late 40s or, you know, however old they are.
Sure. I feel like Leah Thompson's was not as great.
Oh, I mean, she really, but she looks like, between the drinking, she pours herself that tall glass of vodka, and then you see her, it all plays in when she's young and she looks and she's beautiful. And, like, there's such attention to that detail where when she's older, it looks like she's been through 30 years of drinking and smoking.
Yeah.
And same thing. I mean, Crispin Glover just has that physicality to him at the beginning. Where he's just like that guy who never really had what it took to push himself to the next level. He's the George McFly you see in the past.
Sure, you know, doing Biff's work for him and. Yeah, all that stuff.
You know who else doesn't age in it is James Tolkan. Strickland.
That's done on purpose, though.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Absolutely. Absolutely love it.
Great.
Details like such as in this first scene when they're having dinner at the McFly house, and it's just like these are people who are not doing well in life. What board game do you see in the background? Life.
Oh, yeah.
The game of life. I'd never noticed that before. And
something else, another quality that I only was made aware of recently through TikTok was that at the beginning, when Biff is going through their refrigerator, he sees Miller Lite. And then at the end, when they're in the revised version of present day, where they are suddenly in a better position financially, Doc goes into their trash and finds a can of Miller High Life. So I thought that was a really interesting touch that I had never heard of before. And somebody realized that. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really funny observation. But, you know, I love the story of how kind of the plot was developed by Bob Gale, who thought, if I was in high school with my dad, would we be friends? And it's such a really fun question. And this is such an incredible result of just asking yourself that question of, you know, creating this movie where somebody goes back in time and sees their parents for who they really were and learns so much more about them being that same age as them and seeing them in the same positions that he is currently in. So
now,
way to go, Bob Gale, on figuring that out.
This brings up one of the few, a question that comes up for me every time I watch the movie. So Marty plays a pivotal role in George and Lorraine's getting together.
Right.
So maybe not initially, but after Marty has been in the past and comes back to the future.
That's the name of the movie.
Do his parents never recognize him?
Yeah, there's never just like man, he really looks like that Calvin person.
Remember, no, Marty. They say that Marty. That's a nice name. They name him after himself.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
And they're never like that. Like, and he plays guitar like that.
Yeah.
Like, how do you forget that? Like, he's wailing. He's loves Eddie Van Halen, and he's like, wailing on this guitar. And I love that's another great setup where he doesn't get to play the school dance because Huey Lewis says that they're too loud, and then he goes and gets to play at the school dance.
Right,
Marvin Berry.
That is such a ridiculous moment, but I love it because they just went for it.
When he plays the dance, the most ridiculous part about it is the singing voice.
Oh, the singing voice is, yeah. There's no way in hell.
There was no attempt to find some. Maybe the singing voice was actually Eric Stoltz. I don't know.
Hey, you never know. Yeah. So, quick question for you, Dan. If you went to high school with our father, would you two have been friends?
No.
Yeah, definitely not.
No. I mean, no offense, but
yeah,
like he wasn't a theater kid.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like my knowledge of anything of what our father was like really begins more in his college years. I feel like before that, most of his life goes slightly undocumented.
Yeah, there's some there's stories, there's tales of he delivered milk to milk vending machines. I guess that was the family business for a time. And then even though college, we have some hints.
Just a little glimpse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, bit of a mystery. I'm going to trust that he wasn't up in trees watching girls
birds,
getting
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, birds. Yeah, I mean, also I love that setup because they tell the story at the beginning, and then Marty does what anyone would do when they're seeing their father, or I guess pretty much anyone about to get hit by a car, but especially someone you love, you're going to push him out of the way.
Yeah, for sure.
And he's not thinking like, oh no, wait, this is that. He doesn't know. And yeah, it's so like Lorraine and her, like how just how thirsty, to use in the parlance of our times.
And what's so funny is that she had gone on this whole thing about how when she was a teen, she didn't park cars with boys.
Sit in a parked car with a boy. I never called a boy.
Yeah.
And
asking a boy out. No. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like that Jennifer Parker.
So, right. So moving into the second movie, he goes back to 1985, is there for like, I don't know, 7 minutes. And then Doc comes screeching into his driveway and, clearly thinks that that's the best time for him to go back into the past. Couldn't have given him a couple of days, but decides, no, we have to go. It depends on the fate of your child. And then we go into 2015. And gotta love how they make them just these nice round numbers. Yeah.
Well, he said, and that's what he says. He says at the end when Marty asks him, "All right, where are you going?" And he's like, 30 years. It's a nice round number.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty much exactly what he says. So yeah.
And they introduce so many the flying cars, the hoverboards, and I just love how they recreate the scene from the first one with skateboards, but this time with hoverboards. There's the through line of Biff and Griff and Biff and Griff just with the manure. And Buford with the manure.
Oh yeah,
That's a really funny thread that keeps all them together. But yeah, it's funny because it's like always supposed to be just like such a simple thing where it's just like all you have to do is do this and then we're good to go. But no, it's never that simple.
Never that simple. No. So Back to the Future 2 it's a movie that, and on this recent watch, I definitely was a little pickier, but it's a movie I've got a lot of love for. I think it takes a lot of great chances. It takes a lot of risks. And I mean, it goes dark and it is.
Oh, when they go back to the alternate 1985.
Well, yeah. It's also, if you talk about something that ages well and turned out to be like somewhat accurate, Back to the Future 2, I felt like, and I'm not just talking about the alternate 1985 and, the comparisons between, alternate 1985 Biff and Donald Trump. There's a lot of similarities there, a lot of connections that have been made, especially over the past several years. But even if you look at like the Cubs winning their first World Series, they were in the playoffs in 2015. They did not make it to the series, but then they won the series, I think, 2 years later.
Sure. It would have been 2 on the nose anyway.
Yeah. But also, if you take into account like the kind of early 2010s 3D movie boom and the Jaws 10 or Jaws 19. Yeah. Also the sequels, like how everything is just a sequel to older things.
Sure.
And I mean, there's of course like Steven Spielberg references, because then there's also the Jaws Nintendo game in the window of the antiques shop.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there were some other, I think there was a Roger Rabbit doll in there too.
Yes. Yeah. So a little Zemeckis, self-congratulation.
Self-nod.
There. Self-nod, yeah.
What I really love about part 2, and yeah, like you said, of course, there are plenty of things to nitpick about it, but it really takes some big chances by having him go back to 1955, where the other version of himself is currently doing all of these things, and he has to like go and do his thing parallel to his other version of himself and doing his thing. And it is fascinating, and it is really well thought out, the way that that's all plotted and the way that they recreated those moments from different angles, and
how they show the things that you don't that happen within the timeline of the first Back to the Future, but that you don't see, like Lorraine going dress shopping.
Oh yeah.
And just all those things that fit in. You get more of a sense of Biff's home life. He lives with his grandmother.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I love, like, Back to the Future 2 is one of those movies that I enjoy it for its flaws, because without the risks, you don't have those flaws, and just the daring to go dark and like alternate 1985 with the biker gangs, gun violence, alternate
1985 also, where the community where he lives is, there's bars on the windows, and it's a black family living there, which really says a lot about kind of the 1980, I guess 89 mentality of, where things were, where it's, that equals bad neighborhood.
That was the cue they were trying to give. Yeah.
And it's right. I mean, and it was established that Donald Trump was the inspiration for Biff's, future self. I mean, it's that, talk about being on the nose. You have the casino owner who looks the way that he looks with that, the very specific hair, who's, just a real sleazy guy.
And I think that, though, compared to 1989, the shoe fit even better in our 2015.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the reason. I'm referencing things that I see on TikTok about this movie, and it's like people are still talking about this movie, finding things in this movie, and talking about the actors in it with such high regard, and it is its own very special thing that I don't know if we're ever going to really have anything else like this before, especially considering that the third one was kind of a, I don't know,
goof.
It was a goof. Yeah.
Okay, so they shot them back to back. Now the second does a lot to set up the third. Mm-hmm. There's the mention of Buford Tannen. It's where Marty sees the Clint Eastwood movie where he gets the idea for the like bulletproof plate in his vest. But it's like Back to the Future 3, they were just trying to, it was like, let's take Back to the Future and we're going to make it into just a very standard, stereotypical old Western with your stereotypical quote unquote cowboys and Indians, and you know, here comes the cavalry and all that.
You know, and it's also interesting because I feel like in the 90s we did have a lot of, because this came out in 1990. In the 90s we had a lot of other Western movies, but this one came before those. I'm trying to think of like 80s.
Well, it comes
Western.
after Young Guns.
It comes after Young Guns, right, which was 88. When did Young Guns 2 come out?
90,
right.
Yeah,
so
a couple of months after.
But I feel like things like Tombstone and stuff like that, Quick and the Dead, those came out 92, 95.
You have Unforgiven in 92.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of sparked Tombstone and
was Tombstone after that?
Wyatt Earp.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tombstone, I think, was like late 93. Wyatt Earp was 94. Quick and the Dead was 95. Bad Girls was in there with Madeline
Bad
Stowe,
Girls,
Drew Barrymore.
right.
Yeah.
Wyatt Earp was 94. City Slickers 91.
Yeah.
Bad Girls is 94. It's kind of you know, there definitely was like a boom of Westerns right around this time, and this was, you know, a little bit earlier on that boom, but it's a total goof. I mean,
it just feels like they're trying to like. It just felt like a bunch of like in jokes.
Well, yeah, I mean, they had I keep on wanting to call him Marty McFly. It's just because like that is kind of who Michael J. Fox is to me sometimes, is Marty McFly. But, you know, we have Michael J. Fox where like as his ancestor. Somehow they all look identical to each other.
Oh, right. Yeah. Except, and then he plays his ancestor, but he's married to Leah Thompson.
Yeah, which is very confusing.
And they do the whole like, oh, it's okay, you're safe and sound back in good old 1885.
Yeah, I know. And it's really strange. I mean, this one, of course, we have the Virgin Mary Steenburgen, as Clara, Doc's love interest, who is just fantastic.
Oh, lovely.
You know, I'm glad that she kind of comes in like halfway through the movie, because we've already established at this point that it's like, all right, this is just going to be like a weird, dumb, I don't know, like epilogue on what already was this craziness. Yeah. And then it's just like, all right, yeah, sure. Give me Mary Steenburgen. That sounds good.
Well, why not? That's great. Doc has a love interest, and yeah. So I like that. I have no problem with any of that. That's all good.
No, it's the third one. I think I've only seen one other time, probably right when it came out. Yeah. And then I think after that, I was like, I don't know if I need to see this again.
Right.
Until 2022.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he comes in, he looks like Cowboy Curtis when he shows up in the Old West, or when he
well, yeah, he's the 80. Well, no, he's the 50s version of what
like,
cowboys have.
The atomic,
but it's funny that you say Cowboy Curtis, because
Marshall Bravestar.
Well, going back to Cowboy Curtis, because Pee-wee's Playhouse, which is made in the 80s, but has so many throwbacks to like 50s and 60s cultural things within the design of the wardrobe and the sets and everything. Cowboy Curtis is kind of the like 80s, 50s version of an Old West cowboy. So it totally, it's a great comparison for what he's wearing.
Yeah.
And of course he goes back wearing like Nikes. It's
And let's talk about how, like, I love how they're always like, oh, we have to be really careful about everything we do. Meanwhile, like, they don't give a shit. Like, Marty tells everyone his name is Clint, but Doc is calling him Marty.
Oh, yeah.
Up and down.
Well, also, it's Doc goes back in time and becomes a blacksmith. Like, don't you think that's going to change history, like, in some way? Like, he creates, like, horseshoes for somebody, and then that person goes off to, like, I don't know, rob a bank and set off a whole chain of events or whatever. So, I don't know.
They would have gotten those horseshoes from another blacksmith, though.
But then maybe they would have missed the window of opportunity to do their bank robbery.
Or maybe here's the untold story where they go for these horseshoes and they give Doc special material to use to make the horseshoes so that the horses run extra fast. Doc uses those materials in a science experiment, and then they find out, and they come back and they're Libyan.
Yeah. So,
and they're they're in a Volkswagen stagecoach.
Yeah, right. It's really strange to think that Doc Brown would really be okay staying in 1885, knowing how seriously he takes interrupting the space-time continuum and how, like, you can't change anything. Nobody can see you. Like, nobody can be aware that you're here. Meanwhile, he's just like, fuck it.
But all still that shit gets flushed. All that shit in Back to the Future 3, it doesn't. The rules are out.
Yeah,
the
but then it's like, but when you get back to 1985, you got to destroy the DeLorean.
Oh, well, right. Yeah, I know. Yeah. You got to destroy the DeLorean. Meanwhile, and he feels so strongly about, I should have never made that damn thing. Feels so strongly about it. And then he makes a fucking time machine train.
Yeah, steam engine. Yeah. I will say, though, that last part of Back to the Future Part 3, very exciting.
I totally forgot about that part.
So
it's been such a long time, and there were certain things I remembered from it, but I totally forgot that there was anything after the Old West.
So, yeah, right? Oh, totally. So, okay. Well, what I'm saying about being exciting is how they get the DeLorean up to 88 miles per hour, which I thought was very clever the way they did it, because the car doesn't have any gasoline. That has not been invented yet. You know, they haven't figured out how to do that because no cars. And they use a train to get it up to that level, and, like, you know, detaching the excess weight and all this stuff. And it's like they figure out exactly when it needs to go into the higher range and all that kind of stuff. And it was really, I thought, really well thought out at that part, just about the mechanics of, like, how to get this car to go up to 88 miles per hour, and the fact that, like, the track runs out because it hadn't been finished being built, but by the time that it gets to 1985, it will be built, so it'll be on there. It's exciting. Oh yeah.
Oh, that part, absolutely.
Yeah,
no doubt. The rest of it,
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, like, I'm not a huge, like, Western movie fan. There are certain ones that I do care for. I did watch The Quick and the Dead recently, directed by Sam Raimi.
I've been thinking about
Sharon
going back
Stone.
to that one. I haven't seen it, I think, since it was first out.
So our aforementioned brother Scott, he and a lot of our friends that, you know, we grew up with and, you know, met in college and all that kind of stuff, get together every Friday to watch a movie. They all get together on Zoom and then just put on a movie and play it at the same time. And I checked in a few weeks ago and watched The Quick and the Dead with them, and it was so good. It's so good. And it's, you know, I had just watched the new Doctor Strange movie the night before that, directed by Sam Raimi, and it's watching Sam Raimi movies, when you go a long time without watching one and then you watch two in a row, you're just like, man, that guy really had a vision, and he had a really distinct way of, like, angling a camera and like showing you emotion and showing you, you know, the intensity of a moment. And it's really refreshing to revisit those, but it's, you know, no one else can do it because he does that. No one else can do it
very signature. I was watching Darkman recently. Another Sam Raimi favorite of mine, and
the original Sam Raimi superhero movie.
Right. Yeah. Seriously, long before he did Spider-Man 20 years ago, and now Doctor Strange.
Which is, I mean, it's so Sam Raimi. It is a like horror movie essentially.
That's
it's
right.
Really
Did you ever
crazy.
see? Speaking of Sam Raimi, and then we'll get back to the topic. You ever see Drag Me to Hell?
Yeah, Drag Me to Hell is really good.
That's good.
Well, that's with Alison Lohman, who I really like, and is Justin Long in that?
Justin Long, yeah.
Drag Me to Hell is great.
But I remember watching that, and like I like horror movies. I don't necessarily always gravitate to putting them on, but I remember watching that one and just feeling like I was not disappointed at all.
I think that was something. Well, first of all, the title of the movie "Drag Me to Hell" really grabs you, and drags you. You know, it really grabs your attention because it's not structured like most other movie titles. No. And I saw it in the theater, and I remember being like. Really jazzed about it because for Sam Raimi, Alison Lohman is great. Matchstick Men, she was fantastic in.
White Oleander, is that her?
Yeah, I never saw that though, but she was in Big Fish, and I haven't seen her in anything in a long time. I don't know what she's up to, but she really like hit it hard during a few year period, and Drag Me to Hell is no exception. That movie does not hold back.
No.
That was probably like the last Sam Raimi movie that I really remember, because was that after or during the Spider-Man movies?
That was after, because Spider-Man 3 was, I think, 2007. Drag Me to Hell was 2009.
Gotcha. Yeah, then I think that's the last Sam Raimi movie that I remembered seeing. I don't know what he had done since then, but so much fun. But, Sam Raimi is one of those filmmakers who definitely has like a distinct vision. And I think that Robert Zemeckis is another filmmaker who, they're not all hits, but you're always going to get something different with Robert Zemeckis, even if it's something like The Polar Express. But like, Forrest Gump, that even though that movie is... the quality of it is debatable, but you can't deny how cool a lot of the things were that he did with that, that we hadn't really seen before.
That's, and if I can jump in here,
yeah,
that's where I feel like Zemeckis, when Zemeckis can be really good at mixing gimmick with story. The first Back to the Future is probably the best example of that. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is an excellent mix of gimmick and stury. I feel like sometimes he lets the gimmick take over, like the whole like Beowulf, that weird
Beowulf, right?
That weird Beowulf he did. I'm not a fan of Castaway.
Castaway, I didn't like it when it first came out. Dan, you may remember, I did go through a period of time where I was not into Tom Hanks.
Oh, yeah.
But I got over that. And Castaway, I can appreciate for the big swings that it takes, just in terms of like what it is as a movie.
And to be honest with you, I would have liked Castaway a lot more had it not been for the trailer to Castaway kind of giving away the big... It gives away that he gets off the island.
Oh,
in the trailer.
I don't remember that.
So when I saw Castaway, and I was really like, wow, when he gets off the island, this movie really loses its bite. But another great movie that Zemeckis did that same year, and I haven't seen it in years, but What Lies Beneath. Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer, which I thought was a really cool like ghost thriller.
I have to watch that one again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, yeah, I got to go back to that one as well.
Yeah, he's and also there's an iconic shot that is in his movie Contact that it's this famous like mirror shot that happens in it, and that is very Bob Zemeckis to me, where it's just like, he finds these ways to get you to get yourself inside of the movie as if you're watching a magic trick. And I think that that's a good tactic to keep a movie in your memory a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that he does in Back to the Future really successfully. Just looking at some of his other more recent movies, the 2012 movie Flight, I think that, he was the right person to do that.
Well, and that movie is really all like character study,
yeah,
if I remember correctly, and really no gimmick with that other than like the plane.
Well, the
sequence.
Actual plane landing stuff, I feel like that was dealt with in a way that made sense for him.
Yes.
But then he did like Welcome to Marwin, which everybody in the world collectively said, no thanks. And the most recent The Witches with Anne Hathaway, which people were mostly collectively like, I'll just watch the original one. And then the new Pinocchio that's coming out, not to be confused with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. And this Pinocchio is the Tom Hanks Pinocchio, where I think a lot of people are just like, okay, all right.
Why?
So,
but let's not forget The Walk, which I thought
The Walk is good.
The
Walk is good. Joseph Gordon-Levitt as that French guy. I forget exactly where he's from.
Yeah, French tightrope walker.
Yeah, who goes between the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
And that was released 2015, long after the towers came down, and that, of course, I don't know.
And there was, and I also, I don't know, I never saw the documentary, but
the documentary's good.
While we're talking about Robert Zemeckis and gimmicks and story and everything, a movie that we've already talked about on here, Death Becomes Her.
That's right. Yeah.
Which really like awesome visual effects.
The gimmick is what you remember. You remember that fight scene between the two of them. You don't remember a lot of the other aspects of this movie. Maybe you remember, at the beginning when Goldie Hawn is like eating ice cream. And,
yeah,
that kind of stuff. But
and I think the performances in Death Becomes Her also stand out, especially Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, Isabella
and Bruce
Rossellini.
Willis.
And Bruce Willis.
Isabella Rossellini. Oh, so good.
Wonderful. She's wonderful.
Anyway, we're just at the point where we've just crossed over an hour of recording. Okay. And going into this, Dan, just for our listeners, you and I had talked about, like, we are talking about Back to the Future, which you cannot talk about without talking about parts 2 and 3. And we have had this one on our list since the beginning, but it's a daunting one. And at risk of going on for too long, we really kept out a lot of what we could have talked about. So I feel like now is a good time to move on and talk about a life beyond, which, of course, this movie has had many lives beyond. I mean, video games. Was there a television series?
No,
there wasn't television.
No television series. There's a musical.
I feel like you can't talk about Back to the Future and A Life After It now without talking about Rick and Morty, which is a series very much directly inspired by, Marty and Doc.
Yes.
I don't know a better way to put it. There was an animated television series on CBS from 91 and 92. It followed their adventures through various historical periods, intercut with live-action segments featuring Christopher Lloyd performing science experiments with Bill Nye.
I have a vague recollection of this now that you're describing it.
Yeah, and then a short film, Doc Brown Saves the World, was in 2015 to celebrate the film's 30th anniversary. Christopher Lloyd was in it. who must travel to the future to prevent a nuclear holocaust in 2045. Okay. So yeah.
I want to have one where they have to travel through time to stop Back to the Future from being remade.
Okay.
It's kind of like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Okay.
No, that's not my idea.
What is your idea?
Okay. So first of all, I think that there's so many things about Back to the Future that are just that make it unique and make it something special that I don't even think, like, I think about a musical version of Back to the Future and I'm like, any reason why I watch Back to the Future is not going to be in the musical, because I watch it for the cinematography and the editing and the effects with the DeLorean and the performances with Christopher Lloyd, Michael J. Fox, Crispin Glover, Thomas Wilson, etc., etc., etc. And I think about a musical and I'm like, well, I don't want to see someone trying to be like Michael J. Fox or Thomas F. Wilson. And I don't necessarily want those characters in another way. So I wouldn't remake it, but I think this movie is such a cultural phenomenon that you could do something with it where in present day, a kid who is, scientifically minded, has an aptitude for science, and who is in love with the movie Back to the Future, perhaps like my high school friend Bob Salguero, and is watching this movie and it has seen this movie so many times that whoever decide is like, wait a second, I think we could actually do this. Like, I think that this like made up science fiction could actually work, and that using modern day technology and research and all that, really this person, this kid, this group of kids, whatever, builds a time machine like based on the science in the movie, the 1.21 gigawatts and all that. They use a Tesla, and Tesla does have, I believe, a car with a stainless steel body.
Does it really? The Cybertruck?
Yeah, I think like the Tesla. Yeah.
Is that a stainless steel body?
I believe so. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I mean, it's definitely designed to look like it.
Yeah. So.
Oh no, it is stainless steel.
Okay.
See, I thought that the reason why DeLorean flopped so badly was because it was so heavy and such like a gas guzzler that it like didn't make any sense.
But also, if you look at the pictures of the Tesla Cybertruck, it kind of looks like a DeLorean.
It is 1,000%, DeLorean.
So I'm thinking, especially by the time you would make this hypothetical movie, which, if we're talking about it now, 2025, it's a nice round number.
Nice round number.
But yeah, and of course, like, you're not going to have them go back they can't go back to any time after 1985 because they exist, like, we are in a timeline where the movie Back to the Future exists.
Yeah.
But they could go to the 70s and maybe it's something to do with the grandparents. Maybe they're in the mid 70s. They go to 1975. I don't know. And a young Bob Gale is there. Like, it would be great. Like, one of the characters, like, what if they're like, oh man, I have to like find my grandparents. They're in high school or college, and like Bob Gale is there and like is just one of the characters. They could just call him Bob. So I really don't have a lot of details panned out for this, but I'm thinking like you could totally do something like that where they build a time machine and they use the movie Back to the Future as kind of their guide of how to operate in the past. And in terms of casting, like the first actor that came to mind was Sadie Sink, Max from Stranger Things.
She's so good.
I don't know. She's kind of got that, like, there's that Marty McFly vibe. And it's not just the skateboard, but like,
Right.
I don't know. That's who I pictured, but really,
it's easy to envision her in multiple eras because we certainly know what she's like now and what she would have looked like had she been in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
But this would also, like, if you go back to the 70s, there are no Back to the Future movies that have visited the 70s or 60s for that matter. So it would be something different where you can homage Back to the Future, and you can kind of play with those rules, but then also we're in the 70s, and there's all types of 70s stuff depending on when in the 70s they could go in, it's disco, or they're during Watergate or whatever. I mean, for the same token, they could go back to the 60s. I just kind of thought the 70s would work better. And if you think of like a kid who's a teenager now, would it make sense that their grandparents would have been in high school in the 70s? Yeah, I think so. It could.
Yeah, totally possible.
That could work. So that's I don't know exactly what they do. Like, you don't want it to be like you don't want it to be Back to the Future where it's like, oh, I have to make sure my grandparents meet. No.
And also, I mean, I feel like my synopsis wasn't fully clear about the original. He goes back to 1955 by accident because he's just trying to get away from these Libyan terrorists who are after Doc Brown because he has plutonium that he had stolen in order to make an explosive for them. Is that
they hire him to build a bomb?
Yeah, exactly. So they gun Doc down, and Marty's trying to get away in the DeLorean, which Doc had just set to the day in 1955 when he fell on a toilet and blacked out and came to and envisioned the idea for the flux capacitor, which would make time travel possible. And because he hits the gas and it goes to 88 miles per hour, he goes back to that day in 1955. And so the idea is for him to find his way back to the future, or back to his present, and with the 1955 Doc Brown, but instead accidentally changes the course of history for his family and has to then also correct that in order to save himself before he knows when there's going to be a lightning strike at a clock tower that can send him back.
Set up so brilliantly. But yeah, no. His trip into the past is totally accidental. His encounter with his father is purely accidental.
Yeah.
So I feel like in this Back to the Future tribute movie,
sure,
I guess a tribute, I don't know, a tribute, no. I think there is going to be an intention of like, okay, I've discovered time travel and I have to do something really important that is going to benefit my grandparents, a grandparent, something like that. It doesn't have to be a grandparent, but point is they have to go back. They have to go back pre-1980s.
Yeah.
And that's my
cool.
my idea. It's loose. Yeah. It's loose, but I feel like I can't think of another way to do this. You're not going to have a Back to the Future Part 4. I mean, it's just going to be doing the same shit all over again.
No. It's amazing that Back to the Future has the legacy that it has, especially considering Part 3. And
Part 3 was better reviewed than Part 2. I think it did better at the box office, too.
That's so funny. I mean, I feel like after 2, it probably, a third one was probably going to get a bigger box office draw. Anyway, I don't know.
People did not like 2.
And I understand why.
I think it's aged. I think 2 has aged really well. And I think more people now appreciate 2 and not so much 3. But at the time, Everyone's like, oh, 3 was just fun. It was so much fun. And 2 was so dark and scary. I was like, that's why it was great.
I think that 2 also spent a lot of time patting itself on the back. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's showing off.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with this here?
So
what do you got?
Okay, so in order to talk about my idea, I need to talk about a movie that we have never really discussed on this podcast. I don't know if it's come up at all, but we definitely haven't done an episode about it. But I essentially would like to revisit the initial inspiration that Bob Gale had, and the idea of like, would you be friends with your parents in high school or whatever? And I wouldn't want to do it using time travel in the sense of going into a time machine or anything like that. But I really love the way that the movie Peggy Sue Got Married avoids all of the technical jargon, any of the questions of like, well, how is this possible? Because in the movie Peggy Sue Got Married, and I haven't written a synopsis for it, but essentially Kathleen Turner's character, who's having troubles with her ex and her family and everything, she passes out and wakes up back in high school and lives out a few weeks of her life in high school and looks back at the person who would become her husband, then I think ex-husband, or I don't know if they were separated or divorced, Nicolas Cage, who is amazing in that movie. Fantastic. And it's a really fascinating way to do a going back in time movie without having to deal with the mechanics of time travel and the space-time continuum.
Well, there's a bit of wizardry.
Yeah, no, it's totally, it basically says to its audience, this is happening. Don't worry about what exactly is happening or how it's happening. That doesn't matter, because I think that the reality is that it's all just kind of playing out in her mind as she's passed out. Like, you know, there's no actual her going back in time. It's never explained. It's never really picked up on. That's it.
I noticed there's this strange thing with her grandfather who's part of this, like, it's like this Elks Lodge, but they're...
but that's all in the past.
Right, yeah. I watched it not too long ago.
Yeah. It's a really fantastic movie. Francis really Ford Coppola, is that right? Yeah. It's really fantastic. As I said, Nicolas Cage is amazing. Kathleen Turner's so good in it. And it's a really trippy movie. And I feel like the way that I would want to approach any type of, and this wouldn't be in the Back to the Future verse, but it's, you know, it's just kind of going off in a different direction from Bob Gale's original question of like, would you be friends with a parent? Because the idea that I had is essentially like somebody somehow, like, they pass out or something and is kind of transported back in time to their parents' high school days. And we don't have to worry about how it impacts the future. There's no photograph where somebody disappears. There's nothing like that. But it's, you know, of course it would have to start with some sort of like disagreement with parents and, you know, some like a disconnect between generations and the eras in which people are growing up. And of course now with, you know, in 2022, you can't do it without, you know, referencing things like race or sexual orientation or neurodiversity. And I feel like there's something there that could be explored by going back to, you know, the 90s to when, well, let's see. I guess it would probably end up being the 80s. I'm trying to think of like what, if it's a teenager, and I mean, it could be the 90s. So anyway, I think that there's a really interesting thing to explore there. And it's about finding a better understanding with your parents by learning more about who they were at your age. Because, you know, there's certainly the the classic phrase of like, when I was your age, ... And I think that there's something to that. And Dan, now that like, you and I are both parents, and the amount of times that I wish that I could say, when I was your age, we couldn't just watch whatever movie we wanted to. We couldn't watch this show over and over again. We just had to wait till it was on, or like we had to go to Blockbuster Video or whatever. And
I've definitely said
oh no, yeah, but imagine the amount of times that you hold back saying that too. Like it's a real thing. It is a real thing.
It really is. Yeah.
So anyway, that's where I would go with it. Is not actually doing something within the universe of Marty McFly and Doc Brown and the Tannins, but is really just exploring something that goes a little bit deeper back into the original question that Bob Gale had.
So you're doing, and working in a little Peggy Sue Got Married, which Peggy Sue Got Married came out like a year after Back to the Future.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, it was like, I think 86 was
makes sense
because
it was an early Nick Cage movie.
Yeah. Early Jim Carrey as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just plays one of Nick Cage's buddies, really.
Yeah, he's like one of his goofy
that was
friends.
86,
but he's got a lot of screen time in it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Really great movie, Peggy Sue Got Married.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, if I remember correctly, it was, certainly nominated, if not a
Kathleen
winner
Turner, I think, was nominated, and I think the script might have been nominated.
Deservedly so.
Yeah.
It's a really fun watch,
but
there were a
much
lot of
more...
things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, there's just a lot of things that I remember about it, even from like the first time that I watched it, like years ago.
The red M&Ms.
The red M&Ms, that's a big one. I don't know. It's a good one.
It is, and you're right. It's more of an introspective, whereas Back to the Future is much more of what's going on outside.
Yeah.
Peggy Sue Got Married is much more of like, okay, I just came from, here where my marriage has failed. And Helen Hunt is one of her kids in it. Yes.
That's true. I think they're her only kid.
Perhaps.
Anyway. But
anyway.
I think that Back to the Future touches on that element of things where... Marty learns that his dad was into like science fiction stuff, and that's not something that he knew before. And when he finds out, he's like, huh, okay, cool. Like, all right. And, he uses that in order to influence him and stuff like that. But anyway, it's just really interesting to me that Back to the Future, got it a little bit in there, but it's like, you could really focus on that exclusively and just not worry about all the time travel stuff. I mean, the time travel stuff is what made this movie as iconic as it is. The DeLorean, the 1.21 gigawatts, the flux capacitor, like these things that are iconic, like nonsense words that, just resonate to this day.
Just iconic images, iconic lines. Hey, you get your damn hands off her.
Yeah, the score.
Here's a little fun tidbit before we sign off. So, I want to say it was October 26th, 2015.
Okay.
So on that actual day, so for those who don't know, I am a high school teacher, and my warm up, my opening activity in class that day was we watched the scene where Marty first goes into the future and you see all of the future stuff, and I had kids write down like what did they get, what did they almost get, and what did they totally miss.
Right.
About
and
2015.
I feel like there's so many things that exist because of this movie. I live in Portland, Oregon. Nike is headquartered just outside of Portland in Hillsboro. I know that they, want to make those self-lacing shoes work. And, they put out like some versions of that shoe as a throwback to Back to the Future Part 2.
Yeah. It's iconic.
Yeah. Well, Dan, speaking of iconic, do you want to let everyone know what we're going to be doing on our next episode?
Yeah, so our next episode, because we're continuing our theme of May and June and looking at families and movies about family dynamics, which Back to the Future certainly includes some complicated family dynamics. As does the movie we're going to be looking at on our next episode, 1993's Mrs. Doubtfire.
It's about damn time.
You know, it's always just been sitting there on the bench waiting to get called out to play.
This is the right time.
And Mrs. Doubtfire's taken the field. Yep. So directed by Chris Columbus, starring, of course, the late great Robin Williams, Sally,
plain old great Sally Field,
the wonderful Sally Field,
Sally Field,
Pierce Brosnan, Harvey Fierstein, great cast,
Mara Wilson, Matthew Lawrence. I am blanking on the name.
Lisa Jacob.
Yes, Lisa Jacob. She's fantastic.
Yes.
I was gonna say the name of one of the characters,
Robert Prosky
as Jonathan Lundy. Anyway, it is I'm so excited to talk about it, and if everybody who's listening wants to email us, ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com. Let us know if you have any ideas for how you would bring Back to the Future or Mrs. Doubtfire or any other movie or music video series we have talked about.
We haven't talked about.
Yeah, we're just hanging out. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this. But email us, ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com. Check out our link tree for our TeePublic store and all of our social media stuff. Dan has been killing it on the Instagram. And I just want to hear from all of you. It's been a while. And Dan, I don't know what else you would expect me to say, but as you're gunning it to 88 miles per hour, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.
When I'm flying in a plane or I'm on the street, there's a lot of famous people that I like to meet. They shake my hand and never ask my name, and they start asking questions that are always the same. Hey, what's Michael J. Fox like? He's nice. What's Michael J. Fox like? Nice guy. What's Michael J. Fox like? He's an alien. Stop asking me the question. I went to the bar mitzvah of my nephew Josh. Now I'm not Jewish, but I like to nosh. Put on my yarmulke, started to pray, when the rabbi leaned over and I heard him say, hey, was that real manure? No, it wasn't. Was that real manure? No. Was that real manure? It's a movie. Stop asking me the question. Can we take your picture? Come on, look mean. Would you call my friend a butthead on his answering machine? Hey, questions, just fill my head. I went to my doctor said, hey, what does a key grip do? Set up lights. What does the best boy do? Help the key grip. What does a producer do? I don't know. Stop asking me the question. Do you all hang out together? No, we don't. How's Crispin Glover? Never talk to him. Back to the Future 4. Not happening. Stop asking me the question. Hey, who's the nicest famous guy you know? Adam Sandler. Who is the biggest jerk? Gary Busey. How much money do you make? More than you do. So stop asking me the question. Thanks a lot, everybody.